Well, it's my great pleasure and great honor to be here this morning interviewing Shelly Lazarus, who truly has been a lion, or rather a lioness, in the media, advertising and communications industry. I see that this session is billed as part of the creative economy session. It might also be billed as part of the communications economy session, because communication today perhaps is more crucial than ever before. Kitty was just telling me that apparently the Aspen Institute is trending number 4 on Twitter at the moment globally, which is absolutely astonishing. And if nothing else, that reveals the fact that not only do lots of people in Aspen have Twitter accounts and are good at tweeting, I imagine most of you are off there tweeting already, but actually people are very hungry for communication and for ideas. That's one of the things that makes the Aspen Festival such an extraordinary pleasure to be at. But Shelly has had a fascinating career as part of this communications business. You started life at a time when there were very, very few women in advertising. You were one of the original sort of mad women, if you like, rather than mad men. And during your time in advertising, that's changed quite a bit. And I want to ask you about that female factor in a moment. But what I'd like to start by asking you about is a question of what advertising really does in terms of communication and branding. Because we were chatting yesterday, and you were saying that when you first started, it was really about flogging boxes of washing powder or shampoo. That was what advertisers were trying to do. Increasingly, though, we're moving into an era when advertising really is about branding, isn't it? Can you tell me a bit about, why that's changed and why it matters?
Sure. Well, I think one of the things that's actually struck me about the sessions that I've been to at the Ideas Festival is everyone's talking about these very important policy issues and issues of great import. And somewhere towards the end of the session, somebody says, well, the real issue is how are we going to communicate this? How are we going to get people to understand this? How are we going to get people to take action? And I think that it's become, especially as we have more and more means to communicate, it's become part of the central question when you start to deal with any issue of how are we going to get the message out. And so I always say we've gone from big A advertising to little a advertising, because one of the things that we've come to realize is that everything builds a brand. It's not just about, when I started in the business, it was all about 30-second television commercials and print ads, and the big decisions you made were, whether you were going to go into Good Housekeeping or Woman's Day. Today, it's all about everything. When we come to realize that, I always say to clients, probably the most important advertising space of anything they can consider is their package. So what's happening on the package, what's happening in the store, what's happening on the website is important not just to detergent anymore, but to institutions, to people, to ideas. And so everything in the world now seems to have a communications plan. My job has become much more interesting.
Well, good. But in terms of the communications plan, though, and the business of communicating, one of the themes that's come out very clearly at this festival is the degree to which people are concerned that we live in a very fractured world, increasingly polarized. And although something like social media held out the promise of connecting us all, in reality, it tends to create sort of tribes, cyber tribes, if you like, and people retreat into intellectual tunnels. How do you think it's possible to communicate in that kind of fractured world? Does America still have a central pole of ideas or communication channels around which you can actually coalesce?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you see any great, any major event in this country, and everyone goes to television. Everyone's going, oh, it's the death of television, it's the death of newspapers, it's the death of everything, until something really important happens, and then everybody goes to mass media. So in my experience, it's not just hypothetical. I mean, trying to do communications plans and marketing plans for clients. It's tempting to say, we'll just use social media, because it's actually quite inexpensive. It's very tempting, but it never works, because it doesn't give you the kind of scale that you need right now in a concentrated way. So the right answer is it's a cocktail of all the media, and you still need big mass media, in my view. You still need television. You still need print, where you can really explain things in depth.
You definitely need print.
You definitely need print. I know, Gillian. Just and
I'd like to make that very clear to everyone. I hope my editor's watching. Yes.
And in all forms. But then the magic of what we have right now is you can take those mass messages and you can personalize them. You know, when I started in the business, everything we did was to try to simulate real conversation with a real customer or prospect. So you would try to do things as if you could actually have a dialogue with them. So you'd send them mail and you'd have them respond. Now we have the means to do that. Now we have this means of exquisitely targeting people. We know who they are and we know what they're interested in, and then we can deliver the precise right message. Privacy issues have to be considered, of course, but this ability is extraordinary.
But what do you think about these privacy issues? And to what degree do you think this idea of customized advertising is actually going to work? Because I was fascinated the other day talking to some people in New York who were telling me that, 5-10 years ago, all the really bright algo geeks or the mathematical geniuses went into creating mortgage-backed CDOs. Then a few years ago, they went into flash trading, all that kind of stuff, high-frequency trading. Now, increasingly, you've got some brilliant mathematical minds going into social media and advertising on the premise that you can basically track everybody and create customized ads. That's the future. Do you like that?
Yeah, actually I do, but it's not the only answer. It's like the end point. It's the last step before you hit the customer. But if you haven't set up what the value of the brand is, what it means, if you haven't made people lust for something or want to be part of something, or it doesn't matter that you can deliver it exquisitely. So targeting is actually expensive.
Is it not creepy though?
It's a little.
I mean, this idea that someone's watching all my, Facebook friends
creepy.
And then sort of sending me these, adverts, especially for me. I mean,
but I had a conversation with a large audience of in New York a year ago, and I actually mentioned over the course of the talk that Gmail monitors, they find words in all your emails, and people were just appalled, that they're actually, I said, well, they're not human beings who are sitting there, saying, oh my goodness, look what she wrote today. It's just the computer is just picking up keywords. I think the whole thing is creepy, but I think the answer is you have to ask permission.
So it's kind of creepy, but we have to kind of live with it. And when you click online, you don't read the small print, and it's kind of okay. Well,
the question is, what are you getting in return? So for Gmail, you're getting free email. You want free email? Well, they're going to track your words. I think people will go, yeah, that's okay with me if the alternative is paying for it. But I think in each instance, you actually have to explain to people the value they're getting in return. Because the truth is, if you are interested in a trip to Croatia, and all of a sudden you can be fed all this information on what's going on in Croatia, good deals on hotels and all that, you kind of opt in for that. I think you kind of like that.
I'm going to do a bit of market research here. I'm going to ask the audience and check you're all awake because it's Sunday morning. How many of you are happy to opt in for being tracked in exchange for having free email, etc.? How many of you like the idea of getting personalized adverts?
Some. So the rest of you can opt out. That's okay. No, that's okay. But I actually think that the answer is we've got to ask permission.
Okay. All right. Well, let's come to a company which may or may not always be asking permission clearly, which is Facebook. Do you think Facebook is actually ever going to make money off advertising on a scale that justifies the kind of hype around it right now?
I have no idea, because I'm the person who goes around the world saying that we, and I put a good part of the burden on the advertising industry, we have not figured out how to use Facebook as an advertising medium. And the whole premise of Facebook is all premised on an advertising model.
Yeah.
And those ugly little messages in the corner, no one thinks they're doing much good. Now, the answer to Facebook has the privacy issue to it. The potential for Facebook is that it's institutionalized word of mouth. There is no advertising medium from the beginning of time that's as powerful as word of mouth. This has the potential to institutionalize it. Your friends will tell you what they're doing. what they're buying, but how to get over the privacy issue. So for 36 hours, Facebook shared with everybody what everybody was buying, viewing. It just raised a bit of a privacy issue. But what I worry about is that they're not paying enough attention to it, because that is the whole answer. And if you can't figure out, now you have this sort of great momentum of everybody, because everybody is on Facebook. All the advertisers are saying, well, if that's where people are, we have to be there too. But if it doesn't really have advertising value, it's going to soon lose its momentum. But I do think it's a burden of the advertising industry too, to figure out how to do that, to figure out how to use it. Look, Google, search is brilliant. Search is a brilliant use it's a brilliant advertising medium. And Google's done that so well. So, it's solvable, it just has to be solved.
Well, if it still has to be solved, it raises very big questions about Facebook's valuation and things. So when asked how many of you have Facebook shares. But in terms of looking at the future and the branding question, which companies do you think have branded themselves well over the last decade? Who gets it branding-wise?
Well, I mean, everyone says Apple, but everyone says Apple because it's true. I mean, it's kind of, you can tell an Apple product before they even tell you it's Apple. I mean, it is so brilliantly branded. Everything they do is branded. Everything has a voice, a point of view, a design language. Starbucks, I think, has done a brilliant job of, again, I talked about the package. I think Starbucks was so smart to put so much of their messaging on the coffee cup, actually, because just think of, for 10 minutes, you're taking that cup, you're drinking it. You can read what they're all about, what their values are every time you pick the cup up, and they don't use much in the way of traditional advertising dollars. I don't
think we've ever had a Starbucks ad in the FT, sadly.
No, I don't. They do it very, very rarely. They do it for a new product introduction or something. But the whole store, the store is the brand. And there's some coffee in the cups, and that's pretty good. But that's like 20% of the package, I think.
Okay, so who's branded themselves badly?
Well, it's hard to say who's branded themselves badly. It's people who just haven't, they just sort of haven't broken through. And you can name those people as well as I can. It's we did another answer I was going to give you on who's done it well is we did the turnaround of IBM. Mm-hmm. IBM in the mid-90s was on the cover of Fortune magazine as a dinosaur. Literally, it was like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and it said IBM. And actually, there was a little General Motors that was another dinosaur, and there was Sears as the third dinosaur. And IBM had negative brand value, which meant that you'd be better off shipping a product in a plain cardboard box than a box that said IBM. The fact that it said IBM made you like it less. Just think about that. It's, and so how'd you like to deal with that as a marketing problem? And they just turned, so they had negative brand value. That's a bad job on branding. They just turned themselves around. I mean, they just decided that they had to let the world know that actually they had great technology, because they do. They did even at the time they had negative brand value. And they just kept at it. And in the latest Interbrand survey, they're the second highest brand value in the world after Coca-Cola.
Wow.
So that's from 96 to 2011. So even if, so I always say have faith, even if your brand's a little damaged, and you can turn it around.
So if you were let me give you another difficult task, okay, as a branding guru. Today, the banking sector has severely negative brand value.
Gillian, you're so hard.
You're given the task of taking the sector with negative brand value, never mind all the whale problems and the libel problems and everything else, and you want to make Americans learn to love their banks again and learn to look at those banks and their heart will skip a beat and say, hooray for banks.
If I could do that, definitely the Nobel Prize. Definitely would be in order.
Well, if you did that, you probably would be richer than Lloyd Blankfein, but anyway, or Jamie Dimon. But anyway, how would you do that?
So first of all,
I'm taking notes because I am actually writing an op-ed on this afternoon, so I'm actually multitasking here.
I'd start by saying we're at a point. I mean, it couldn't be worse. I mean, we monitor public opinion all the time. I mean, the lack of trust and the negative feeling about banks is startling when you look at it. So I think we're at what I'd call a deeds, not words point. It's fancy words are not going to get people to love banks again. I think there has to be a commitment to a set of behaviors that the banks are going to commit to. And there almost has to be a pact with the public about what is going to, what we will always do, what we will never do. In plain English, I'm not talking about regulation. I'm not talking about all that government lawyer stuff. It's just plain English, a pact with the public. And one of the things, Gillian, though, that I do find interesting is people actually like community banks. When we say people hate banks, yeah, they do. But they still like their little community banks, and they still like their community bankers. They know them. They're part of the community. And so there is definitely you need bankers. You do need banks and bankers. So if somehow we could think about what is it about the community bank, what is it that people see in it that makes it so valuable, that makes them trusted? And see if we could then kind of make that, broaden that to the big national banks. It's that's the way I think about it. But we're at a point where we're deeds, not words.
Right. Okay. Well, another tough branding challenge. How would you brand the White House today?
Oh my goodness. Do you mean the White House or its occupant?
Well, why don't you start with its occupant, okay? I think the White House has a good brand already, but speaking as a
So I just must tell you that from the beginning of time, from the time David Ogilvy founded Ogilvy and Mather, he said from the beginning, we are never going to do political advertising ever because we don't know how to do it, and basically we don't. This is just not an area that we've ever have any comfort with, and so to this day, we don't do political advertising and won't do it. I think that here too, the president has to have a real plan for what he's going to do in the next term. And, we bought into a very aspirational, very hopeful look at the future when he ran the first time. And I think, we'll disagree about whether it was circumstances or experience or whatever it is. He didn't deliver much, I don't think. He delivered health care, and I think he was okay on foreign policy. But I think the issue for Americans from the time Obama came into office, and again, this is things we monitor, it was jobs, jobs, jobs. And this is the question that I don't think the White House has answered, is you can't just make people say, it's going to get better. The economy is going to get better. I think we're at a point where people have to understand what things are going to actually happen to create jobs, because it's not going to happen naturally. And since this is the burning question, this is the source of anxiety. I heard an incredible statistic from the White House. I don't know what the number is now, but at the time when unemployment was 9%, the percent of households where one person in the family was unemployed, one of the husband or the wife, was a number like 25%. So 25% of households in the country have somebody unemployed. And the second issue is there are people who feel they're holding on by a hair. So I've heard the White House say, we saved all these state and local jobs that would have been lost. Well, if you've been saved, but you don't know, you're not sure what's going to happen 12 months from now, if you're going to be saved again. Remember, we're in a consumer-led economy. 70% of this economy is led by consumer purchases. If you feel that you might be unemployed in a year, you're not going to go buy a new couch. You know, you're not going to go buy a new dishwasher unless it breaks. So that the consumer psychology that comes out of the anxiety about jobs, I think is the central question that we have to answer in the next 4 years. So, and that's what I would talk about.
And so on the other side of the spectrum, I mean, again, you're not a political advertising or consultancy group, but how would you brand Romney to take advantage of that? How would you make him look sexy and appealing?
I wouldn't make him sexy and appealing. I'd make him a wonk who knows how to do the economy. I'd make.
So you're a friendly local accountant.
Yeah, he's the jobs guy, but he's got to have a plan too. I mean, we're past words on for both these guys. It's kind of just give me the plan. Let me believe. Give me the narrative. You know, we need a narrative of here's where we are now, and here's where we need to get to for job creation, and here's the path. Of course, it's not going to be a straight path. But here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to engage the private sector. Here, you know, whatever. I don't know what the policy parts are, but I do know what the American public is waiting to hear.
Right. And in terms of, I mean, as you may know, there have recently been a spate of advertisements about America as a tourist destination elsewhere in the world, which is quite unusual because, in fact, America wasn't really advertising itself as a tourist destination until recently, because it just kind of presumed that people would come anyway. So it's kind of interesting
that is true. I was advising on all this. That is true.
Oh, I didn't realize you were advising on it. Oh, great. Okay. Right. So given that America now feels the unaccustomed need to advertise itself, how do you think America should advertise its brand in the world today? What is the core essence of America that's going to make everyone feel, yes, I want to go there, live there, invest in there as a business?
Well, it's, you know, one of the things about great brands is that they have strong cores. There's always a core. There's a DNA that is immutable. If you're smart, it's immutable. You know, and it doesn't matter what the circumstances, what you know, the world changes, the way we communicate changes, the context, the things that are important to the issues that are important in a moment changes, but the core stays the same. So the core is the same. And I think that that's what people respond to around the world. So, you know, not to be simplistic or trite, but this whole sense of freedom is what people want to experience. It's the freedom, the diversity, the spirit of America, this basic optimism that I think people outside the United States just they want to experience it up close and personal and see what it's like. You know, of course, it is fascinating that the number one destination, I think, is that people want to go to is Disney World, which is, I guess, it's part of the zeitgeist of America. So, but I think it is it's freedom interpreted 25 different ways.
Right. Well, someone who took my daughters to go to Disney World at spring vacation, I can tell you that you feel anything but free.
I've had the same experience.
By the time you come out, you feel completely mugged in terms of your wallet and all the rest of it. But last, I think many of you have been to Disney World too. Last question before I turn to the audience. Anne-Marie Slaughter is going to go on stage later on talking about whether women can have it all or not. It's an issue I hate talking about myself. But I got sort of hijacked on going onto television last week to talk with her about her very interesting essay. And those of you who haven't read it, I would recommend reading it very strongly. You know, you are an extraordinary beacon for women in the sense that when you started in advertising, you were telling me yesterday you would often be the only woman in the room.
It's true.
Which is something which, you know, these days it's worth remembering. How have you managed to do it as a woman? And do you believe that women can have it all, or do you accept the Sheryl Sandberg's thesis that people just have to try a bit harder? Or do you think that Anne-Marie is correct to say, actually, it's just a completely impossible dream?
No, I actually think women can have it all, but they can't have all of it all at once, all the time. You know, it's, I think that where we are today, and I was actually a little surprised that the whole issue has come up again, because I think where we are is that we have, as women, we've won the right to sort of choose our own path, that we're free to choose our own path. We've proven we can do it. I don't think there's anyone now who believes a woman couldn't be president of the United States, a woman couldn't be a CEO, a woman couldn't be the president of an Ivy League university. I mean, you know, you just think about what people thought 10 years ago and where they are now. So I don't think we have to prove it anymore. And so now the question is, what do you personally want to trade off in order to get what you want? Because you can't have it. You can't have it all. You can have bits of it, or you can have bits of it in stages. Or so I think it's not a question so much of you know, women not being that it's a myth. I don't think it's a myth. I actually think it's true. Look at my own life. I mean, you know, my husband. You
have 3 children?
I have 3 children.
Yeah.
I've been married to my wonderful husband, who's sitting here for over 40 years. Our kids are well adjusted. We have 4 grandchildren. Our daughter works. I mean, you know, it's always interesting to see what your children do, having grown up in a certain way. So I, you know, and I've not been thwarted at all in my career goals. You know, people always ask me when were you discriminated against? When, you know, were you ever discriminated against as a woman as you were coming up? And the truth was that I would walk into rooms and I was the only woman, and you know, I was the first woman who represented the agency to clients who were all men, and I never, with one small exception, you know, years ago, I never at any one moment had a client say, I don't want to work with that person because she's a woman. Ever. Even back in 1972, when women were odd in the workplace.
And you came in just a fraction after the Mad Men heyday. Yes. But were there still a lot of martinis and tight sweaters?
Well, here's what happened. So, you know, I thought I missed all the fun. I was Mad Men was about 15 years when Mad Men started, the first series. It was about 15 years before I was in the business, and there were lots of martinis, but they weren't in the office. That's what happened in the 15 years. They all went across the street, so there was as much drinking. And there was probably as much sex, but it was all now outside of the office instead of inside the office. But I think one of the things that Mad Men nailed, based on my own experience coming in 15 years later, is the role of women. I think they got that. And there was not one woman at Ogilvy when I joined who was in an executive position, and there were some of them in a professional position, who had not started as a secretary. Wow. Every single one of them had started as a secretary, and so it was that's just the way it was.
Yes, well, it's a very good reality check for, you know, current women working, you know, who like to complain about how difficult it is. Just to remember, you know, the kind of struggles that people like you had to go through, and do so with a great big smile.
Yeah.
So.
No, but it was great. I said I always had this enormous power. I was aware of it at the time. But just imagine, you know, first of all, most of the products that we were selling at the time, that we were advertising, were products that were directed to women. You know, so you have to. So picture this conference room. There are 12 men sitting around a table, and me, and they're pontificating about, you know, sanitary napkins. Actually, it was true. Kotex at Kimberly Clark had no women working there. Just and there were no women, and so there were these men who were just talking about what it was like to have your period, which I just found extraordinary. It was just for all the women in the room. I remembered this line to this day. Here's my favorite line. So the male creative director said, "It's the promise of fertility coursing through your body." and you know, you sir, obviously have never had your period. And so after about half an hour of this conversation, they would all turn to me and go, well, Shelley, what do women think? and I was now talking on behalf of all women in the world. It was just, the power was extraordinary. So I don't think I was ever disadvantaged. I actually think I had this enormous advantage because I was the only person who came close to like doing laundry. You know, not that I did it that often, but at least I had the potential of doing laundry.
So who does laundry now in your house?
Well, somebody else.
Wow.
But I appreciate it.
Well, that's a story which is in many ways as inspiring as anything else I've heard from the kind of women's group. But I realise I've taken up a lot of time. We do have 2 microphones in the audience. If any would like to ask questions, please do. It would be courteous, but not compulsory, to identify yourselves. And do try to keep your question as short as possible, because I can see quite a few hands already, and we haven't got much time left. So 1, 2, 3. All from men.
Thank you. My name is Dick Rubinoff, and I'd like to have your comments on the JCPenney situation, where they came out with a marketing plan that you didn't know if they were selling Prada or Walmart. You didn't know if the price was $1 or $1,000. And it was just like they left you up in the air. What was the product? What was the price? What are you selling?
No, I agree with you. I don't know anything about JCPenney, and I'm only a sort of an outside observer as you are. But I think one of the things that they tried to do, which is probably as hard a task as you can have in marketing, is they tried to change consumers' behavior. They tried to change the way they shop. You know, these shoppers at JCPenney, they shop price. You know, they shop sales. They like it. There's a bit of an adventure, you know, to shopping a sale and being smart about getting a good price. So they changed the whole approach to retail. At the same time, they didn't really fix the brand, so that, you know, you didn't really know who JCPenney was. They went to, I thought the advertising for Ellen DeGeneres was actually quite clever, but I didn't know who JCPenney was anymore. You know, it just sort of happened all at once, and I don't think it brought the consumer along with, you know, what is the actual proposition? What are you doing here? And my guess is that they're going to have to revert to some of the ways they used to market in the past on their way to getting to another place.
Interesting. Right, question back there.
Yes, John Horton. It's about Facebook. I'm sure many of us in the audience were fascinated by your comment on the advertising at Facebook being so unproven. I think you mentioned something about the crummy little ads on the bottom are not doing much of anything. And yet the company's on track for, I don't know, maybe somebody in the audience knows, I think $5, $6, $7, $8 billion of revenue this year. And so question number 1, could you reconcile those 2 things, your comment and those sort of sizable revenues? And number 2, where is Facebook relative to some of the other media, maybe magazines and print, in regard to proven ROIs? Thank you.
So I think you have an audience that probably owns quite a lot of tech shares, so we have a personal stake in this.
Well, so my issue, I actually have enormous belief in Facebook. I mean, if you can get that many people using Facebook, I think it's the new way to communicate, which is why I say it's incumbent on all of us to make it a powerful advertising vehicle, because I just don't think it is yet. I think it has the potential to be. As I said, I think it has the potential to institutionalize word of mouth. And that is enormous. We've never been able to do that. But I think what you're seeing now is advertisers rightly going to the place where people are. You know, you've got to deliver your message at a place where people are gathered. And so they're gathered at Facebook. So it's a setup. You know, it's a great setup for a brilliant enterprise. It just hasn't been done yet. It's just not it's not even that it's not a proven advertising medium. I just don't think people can even look at it and believe that, given the way advertising, the kind of advertising that's sold right now, that it is an effective advertising medium. And what I fear is that as people are starting to question it more, that the advertising dollars will start to fall off. So, I mean, it's all opportunity. It's all about figuring out how to use it as an advertising medium, because Lord knows that the people are there, and it's just a question of how to use their attention well.
So would you buy Facebook stock?
No, I wouldn't.
Right, we got a question back there, and then there. Actually, let's go back there first, and then come there.
Hi, so I have a question about branding for social causes and social organizations. I think there's a lot of issue fatigue, a lot of cynicism about organizations that tell you that you can change the world by using their platform or whatever. And I'm wondering if you have insights into organizations that have successfully broken through that fatigue.
Are you talking about not-for-profits?
Yeah, or just even social businesses. So, you know, platforms like change.org, which are for-profit, I think, but are based on affecting social change.
Well, you know, it's just a question of how to engage the public. I mean, just throwing a lot of fancy words at people doesn't usually work. But I look at something like, you know, American Express did the Members Project, and it started as a small idea, and the program was that there were they got it down to 4 different charities, 4 different not-for-profits, and card members could vote for the one they wanted American Express to give a large donation to. So it started as sort of a quiet, small idea. And then people got so engaged with it. So many card members were coming to the American Express website to vote. And of course, the other wonderful thing that was happening is on their way to voting, they were reading about all these different organizations and what they were doing. So I think it's the element of engagement that's important. I think what worked here was the fact that you could vote, that there was action, someone got a chunk of money. It's just, and on the way, people were educated about some of these great causes, and they could sign up for them and get ongoing communications. And so I think that's the critical thing to think about, is how do you engage people in a mission, and not just talk to them about what you're trying to do.
Right, got a question there, and then question there. My thing's smoking.
Antoine van Haknaal. Shelly, I was curious, and you have traveled all over the world. Do you feel that the American advantage when it comes to branding and advertising relative to companies, let's say, in China and India, has been shrinking or has it been increasing? And do those companies get it?
Well, that's a fascinating question, Antoine, because and it varies. You know, so you know, it doesn't take enormous brain power to figure out branding. I mean, it's just. But you do have to have some experience with it. So in India, for instance, they have companies that are brilliantly branded. I mean, the work that's done for Cadbury, for instance, in India, is as good as any Cadbury advertising that's done anywhere in the world, probably better. And China is its own place, and it's been fascinating, because just imagine if you can actually, if you grew up without ever having had brands or choices in products and services. And so you grow up without it, but now you recognize in China the value of brands. You can either just manufacture products, or you can develop brands, and you can get 4 times the profit by developing a brand. But if you haven't grown up with the experience of having brands, it's actually very hard to get companies in China to understand brands. They want it. They understand how important it is. But we need to bring. We've had to bring expats in to kind of educate them, and so it's been kind of a fascinating experience. Now, the issue is who can do global brands. That's another question, because certain countries messaging travels better than other countries. America happens to be really good at doing brands for the world. France is actually very good at doing brands for the world. India's not quite as good. But I think this is something that's slowly happening as the world is globalizing. And my expectation is that there will be global brands that are being introduced countries all over the world. I mean, you know, look what Samsung's done. They used to be cheap Korean manufactured goods. You know, they're just, and they became a brand, really, a premium brand over the course of 10 years. They just did it.
Do you hire social anthropologists to help you understand brands? I say
We
that
do.
from an entirely biased perspective, because I trained as a social anthropologist and worked as an academic for a while before I became a journalist.
Yeah.
And social anthropologists used to be some of the most unemployable people. In
No, we
academia.
have them all the time. We use them. They're brilliant. They're worth their weight in gold. We had them recently traveling back and forth on different airlines and observing the behavior. The one thing I will tell you is that people in first class on BA, they fold their blankets when they leave, which I just find extraordinary. And the guys on Delta just throw them. This
is why you need to hire anthropologists.
No, but just the behavior is fascinating.
Yeah.
They also, we also had them recently sit in different fast food chains. And one thing I can tell you is that nobody talks to anybody else in Burger King. I'm not sure why. In McDonald's, there's a lot more conversation going on across the table. But these are brand elements that are real.
Great. Well, job creation for anthropologists. We got a question there.
Hi, so I'm Pamela Dressler, and I run a small, high-end goat cheese company, and so 15 million only. So I'm curious if you think it's easier or harder these days to build a small consumer brand, not technology, than it was in the past with all the consolidation at retail and even in the supply chain.
Well, I think it's easier because the targeting is, I think, what makes it an easier task, because you know more or less, I imagine, who eats high-end goat cheese. And so with that profile, you can go in and exquisitely target the people who are interested. You know, Tesco in the UK has this program where everyone uses a Tesco card to shop because they get great discounts. And what they've done brilliantly is they've analyzed, so they have shopping data basically on people who represent 50% of all the supermarket shopping in the UK. And they've managed to segment them into 5 different segments. And it turns out that only 15% of consumers shop on price, really. So only 15% are interested in knowing when the price is cut. Another 15 are desperate to know about new high-end food products. And so, you know, this kind of information, to know who the 15% are and to be able to just tell them, if it's only 15%, just think what they could offer them. When this is really the power of it. When it's only 15%, I could almost offer you free goat cheese for trial if I only have to do it to a certain number of people. And so I actually think it's the time for small enterprise because of the you know, exquisite targeting that's available.
Okay, we have time for one last quick question. Oh yeah, back there. And it'll have to be very quick, I'm afraid.
Uh-oh. This is not too quick, so maybe I should
Hello, Rick.
stop right. I'm Rick Braddock. Hi, Shelley.
Hi,
How are
Rick.
you? I wrote a column that appeared in the FT about a week ago, and it basically argued that Facebook will never accomplish their valuation. But the broader things I tried to argue are, number one, that these devices, both mobile phones and internet, are really selling devices rather than brand advertising devices. Yes. And that marketers are looking for basically smart information, which is oftentimes not social media type, but behavioral information they could use real time. That's going to change the role of advertising, I think, going forward, because they got to help people sell as opposed to the traditional brand strengths they've had. I guess my question is, do you agree, Shelley?
No, Rick, I agree completely, but I actually think that the real value of all the new media is that we can now cash in the advertising. I mean, the point before is, could you ever measure the ROI on mass media advertising? Well, not very well before. But actually, one of the things that these selling devices let you do is you can actually cash it in right away, and you can know whether, the whole cocktail is working. And J.C. Penney always could, and retailers, because they'd run advertising and then they'd see if people came to the store. But for more packaged goods and mass marketers, they now have the opportunity to sort of see, because you can cash it in with these more selling-oriented media that are available. But I agree with you.
Fascinating. So it might be creepy, but at least you can count it.
Yes.
Key thing. And cash in. Well, listen, it's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for such an entertaining discussion.
My pleasure.